AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez, and joining me today is Megan. Megan, how you doing?
Not bad, Lyle. Thank you so much for having me on again. This is great. I'm very excited about today.
Yes, we are, because today we got a real special episode for you. We're talking to best-selling author Alyson Richman about her brand new novel, The Missing Pages. This story blends real history, the Titanic, and a haunting set inside Harvard's Widener Library, where the ghost of Harry Elkins Widener, a real person, lingers among his beloved books. It's part ghost story, part love story, and a powerful look at how memory and grief can echo across generations. Megan and I can't wait to dive into this conversation. Alyson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yes. It's a great concept for a book. I really like it when books blend real history with a little bit of fiction. They take a little bit of liberties, but I thought it was great. Megan, you're the one that actually took a better look at it. What did you think?
I absolutely loved it. I was just chatting to Alyson before we came on, saying when I first heard we would be interviewing her and it was a book about the Titanic, my initial thought was, okay, what more could possibly be said with the Titanic? But to be honest, she's nailed it. It's absolutely amazing. I was completely engrossed from the very first chapter, and it really is a fresh take on the entire story from the perspective of a real person who existed and was on the Titanic. So yeah, as a historian and as someone who really enjoys reading, I was absolutely mesmerized.
Yeah, Alyson, the Missing Pages, it blends real history with like a ghost story. What was the very first spark that led you to tell Harry Widener's story?
Right. So thank you for asking that question. It was sort of an unexpected gift to learn about Harry Widener. And the person who gave it to me unexpectedly was my high school student, Charlotte, who was looking at Harvard University for possibly going to college there. I was not with her. She was on a summer program, and they arranged for the students to have a tour of the university. And when the tour guide got to the steps of the Harry Elkins Widener Memorial Library, he shared with the students that this library at the school was named after a Harvard graduate, a 27-year-old young man who loved books. He was a passionate book collector, and he had gone over to London to purchase new books for his library, new in the sense that they were antique books, antiquarian books, but that things that he wanted to purchase to expand his collection. And that there was this legend surrounding him, that when the catastrophe hit the ship, his mother beseeched him to get on her lifeboat with him. And he told his mother he had to go back to his cabin to retrieve one of the rare, precious books he had just purchased. And he was never seen again. The book was never found. Upon his death, his mother built this incredible library at Harvard for him. At the center of the library is a memorial room to Harry Widener, which is a reconstruction of his office with its oak bookshelves, his original desk and chairs. And in her behest, his mother stipulated that every week, Fresh flowers needed to be put on his desk to conjure up the sensation that at any moment his spirit might pull down one of the books from his bookshelf and sit down to read. And so when my daughter told me that story, I mean, she thought it was an incredible story, and she knows her mom's a novelist. So she said, "Can you believe this story?" And I said, well, at first, I just thought he had to have told his mother that story in order to make sure that she got in the lifeboat, that she got off safely, and he was just going to stay behind with the other, men who were on board. But the more time that passed, I started to think, was there any credibility to the fact that he might have gone back to his cabin to retrieve a book? And if so, what book could that have been? And so that started me out on this sort of this deep dive to find out what he purchased when he went to London, what the book could have been. And then I started to think there was probably a novel there. And I think I had that emotional flicker right away, because you can see this scene between a mother and son. You can see this torque between a son desperately wanting to give his mother the gift of hope that he would be on the next lifeboat. And you can also see it from his mother's perspective to save her son. And then I started to think, after I started to find out that there was in fact a book that he had gone to London to purchase that was very, very rare. Wouldn't it be interesting to write this novel from the perspective of his ghost inside the library that his mother built in his honor, giving him the chance, Harry the chance, in his own words, to tell the story of what really happened in those last moments as the Titanic was sinking?
That's absolutely amazing. I think that was one of the things that grabbed me from the start, was you had so beautifully described how his mother had created the library and the room, recreating his study as a testament to her love for him, and just the emotion that went into that. And it got me because I have a small son, and I just thought, oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine, like, there would never be marble enough in the world really to try and remember your son by. And it was just such a wonderful foundation to start the book on, and it made it so real and so personal. I just thought it was fantastic.
I mean, it instantly, when you hear this legend about him, you're intrigued. But this mother-son dynamic, and how a mother creates this lasting legacy for her son and his book collection, and his story is told day after day. I mean, there's probably dozens of tours that are given at Harvard, and every time these guides stand in front of the library, they share this legend about him. So his name is never forgotten. But there's also the actual architecture of space, that this library has this memorial room for him, and these flowers are still put on, so it's active and alive still. It's not a shrine. It's still something that feels very much like the beating heart of the library. And when you walk into the Harry Elkins Widener Memorial Library, it's all white marble. There's this one singular staircase that leads up to the central room, which is his memorial room. And that room is all in this deeply varnished wood. It's almost like an oxblood mixed with honey color. And you see his portrait, illuminated over the marble mantle. And it really feels like something living within, the white tomb of a monument. It's something that feels very much alive. And so writing from his viewpoint of a ghost, it just seemed natural, because he does seem like he lives there even to this day.
Do you know what book it was that he was supposedly had bought? And I'm not sure if we mentioned it yet.
Yes, we did not mention it. So it is believed that the book that he went back to retrieve was called The Little Bacon. It was a copy of Francis Bacon's essays, a 16th century bound volume that was so small it could fit in the palm of your hand. Some people like to say it was the size of a baseball card. It was only one of its kind, and it was extremely, extremely valuable. He went to London to meet with Bernard Quaritch, the bookseller who sold it to him. And I actually went over to London because Quaritch Limited still exists today. And they have letters leading up to Harry going over there, what books he was intending to purchase. And that's all are different scenes in my novel when he goes to meet with Quaritch and another female bookseller that he meets by the name of Ada Lippenhold. that's all part of, the story.
Yeah, one of the versions of the story that he placed the book inside of his tuxedo pocket, and the ship sank, and it. But there is no verifiable evidence that this ever really took place, as far as I can see.
Well, there is verifiable evidence, because after the Titanic went down, Bernard Quaritch, the London bookseller, wrote to A.S.W. Rosenbach, who was Harry's beloved Philadelphia bookseller, who he bought most of his books from and was a mentor for him. Quaritch wrote to him, and he said that when Harry purchased the little bacon from him, he joked with him that he was going to put it in his breast pocket of his dinner jacket, and he was never going to take it off his person, and that should he be shipwrecked, he'd have something to read. He made that joke to Quaritch. And so in the letter, Quaritch went on to say, if a body is found with a book in their dinner jacket, the corpse, it could be used to identify Harry, because he did say this to me. But the book was never found, and Harry was never found. So it's part of the mystery of whether was he holding it on him when it went down, or did he actually go back to get to the cabin to get it? And I have my take in the book. I don't want to give it up, but kind of, I think the truth always comes somewhere in the middle of these two, stories, because they're sort of the bookends of what we know.
Yeah. We did like the book takes place in, a portion of it takes place in the Widener Library, and did you do any research to see real research to see if the Widener Library was said to be haunted at all? Because I don't know if there was any evidence.
So there is stories that are printed in the Harvard Crimson, and they're in the college newspaper, about different sightings, ghostly happenings that have happened in Widener. I mean, I did go to Widener. I did meet with the librarian who is the head of the memorial collection for Harry. We had a wonderful conversation about the collection and the history of the library. But the newspaper articles about ghostly sightings at the Widener are kind of fascinating. There's one story that when Widener was being renovated, that they had to take down this portrait that hangs above the marble mantle in Harry's memorial room, because they didn't want it to become damaged. So his portrait was taken off and put in storage. And a piece of plywood was put in the area where that painting used to hang. And all of a sudden, strange things started happening in the memorial room. Carved plaster in the ceiling started falling in right in front of where the painting used to be. And people started to, librarians started to think that they had upset either Harry's ghost or Eleanor's ghost, because she obviously wanted this room to be protected and to keep Harry's, spirit alive at all times. So the librarians decided that they were going to do a facsimile of his portrait, like almost a poster size, and put it up to see if it would stop. And once they did, it stopped. So, that I think is the most popular ghost story inside Widener.
So you did actually go there and
I did.
Nice. How was that experience?
It was wonderful. I mean, one of the things we haven't discussed is that there's two parallel storylines in The Missing Pages. There's the story of Harry telling what happened leading up to him boarding the Titanic and what happens with this book. But there's also a modern day storyline, and that is of Violet Hutchins, and it starts in 1992. She's a sophomore at Harvard, and she suffered her own personal loss. And she finds herself employed as a page inside the library, working there and being given the job of transcribing some of Harry's letters for the head librarian who is doing a paper on him. And she starts to suspect that for some reason, she's starting to feel that Harry's ghost might be trying to communicate to her. There's all these different odd things that start happening inside the library. And it sets her on this journey of discovery to learn about an untold story of Harry's life. So I told that story because I not only wanted to reveal something, new about Harry's story toward the end and have him kind of as a ghost prompting her to go on this hunt to discover it, but to show a parallel story of someone in modern day who still finds healing in this library that Harry's mother built to help her with her own grief. I mean, this monument that his mother creates is something that gives her purpose after his death. It is a vehicle for her to channel her grief and to make sure her son's name is never forgotten. So how does a student in the 90s also heal within this structure that was created to help heal from grief was interesting to me. So when I went to visit the library, and I met with the head librarian for the Widener collection, I started telling him my idea to structure this book this way. And I said, I want her to be employed there. Maybe she can have a part-time job, behind the circulation desk. I knew so little bit about library work that was the only thing I could think they'd let a student do. And he said, no, you should have her be a page, because we have students work as pages in the library. And I was like, well, what is a page? And he said, a page is the person who is in charge of shepherding the book, the rare books from the bookshelf to the scholars in adjacent reading rooms. And they have access to the books, and they can they have tunnels underneath the library where they go to the stacks to get them, or to go into the Houghton reading room. And he said, I think that will be really interesting for readers to learn about. And I was like, oh, that is. So that's how Violet Hutchins becomes a page. It was from the gift of a librarian there who gave her that job.
Yeah, I was going to ask if the missing pages was more literal than it was more of like an actual missing page of a book.
Right.
Right. I kind of saw that.
It has many different meanings. I mean, obviously she's a page in the library. There's a missing book. And then there's this old untold part of Harry's story. So the untold, the missing pages of his life. So there's a lot of different missing pages.
Yeah. So I want to ask real quick, what does that title mean to you?
The missing pages. So I have to admit, it wasn't the original title. The working title was The Page Turner. Again, going back to this theme of page and page. But maybe 2 weeks before we announced this book to the book trade, there was a new book announced that was coming out 3 months prior to my own, and it was going to be called The Page Turner. So there was a quick, we can't have this be the title. And so I was really trying to brainstorm something that would still have this layered meaning. And as I mentioned, those three things, the missing book, the missing, we have a page working in the library, Harry's untold story. It seemed like The Missing Pages was a perfect title. But why I personally love it, and I think I like it even more than the original title, is that it beckons a question, like, why are the pages missing? And I think for me, when I'm writing a historical novel, I want my reader right from the get-go, right from the first page, to be curious about the things I'm curious about and want to turn the next page and want to be invested in the characters. So those questions are essential for sort of like throwing a lasso out to my readers to come along on my story. And I think having a title that evokes a question is really a smart thing.
Yeah, we should have done like a little scavenger hunt where there's an actual missing page in the book.
Well, that would be a very clever idea.
And then like it's hidden somewhere. It's hidden somewhere inside of the library. Whoever finds it, unlocks the mystery of so and so.
That's a very good idea. Very clever.
Yeah. So how long did the research process take, especially for the Titanic? Because that's not something you can master overnight. That is like weeks and weeks and weeks of diving in.
Oh my goodness, there's so much material out there. There was so much reading involved with the Titanic research. I mean, you have obviously nonfiction sources that are just about the construction of the ship and the the different foibles that happen that caused this terrible tragedy to happen. There's survivors' testimonies, and then there's lots of different documentaries online about even how it sank. Originally we all thought it just sank like this, but it actually broke in half at one point after being on that very sharp angle. Logistically, because of the mayhem that happens when the tragedy happens and how people are evacuated and what decks they went to, and where they were and where different lifeboats were cast off from, and knowing what lifeboat the Widener mother was on and who was on that lifeboat, that took a tremendous amount, months, to be able to sort of dissect that. I do not start writing a single sentence of any of my historical novels until I've done as much research as I possibly can. I like to describe that process of almost harvesting the research, and then once it's sewn almost into my skin that I know it so well, then I sit down to start writing, because then I can concentrate on creating the characters and their emotions. And obviously I have the books and the archival information at my fingertips, but I really have processed it in my mind. So that takes well over a year to get to that point. And then traveling to the places as well. I mean, I not only, as I mentioned, traveled to London to read the letters that Harry wrote to his bookseller, to see this. I mean, it's not the original structure anymore that he went to when he was in London. The bookstore has since moved, but, to actually touch his letters and to kind of capture his voice of how he wrote his letters was really essential, particularly since I'm writing in his voice for part of the novel. One of the things that struck me right away was that he really wasn't formal in his writing. We think of when, people writing in, 1912 being very, very formal, but there was a whimsical quality, a lyrical lightness to the way he communicated that was really beautiful. And that really was important to capture when there's this banter between him and the female bookseller, Ada. How would they have spoken? How would he have written to her? How would he have closed his letters? Even what's, his did he sign it Harry? Sometimes he signed HEW for Harry Elkins Widener? All those details were important to me. And then there was traveling to his ancestral house, which is outside Philadelphia in Elkins Park. His grandfather built this incredible estate that was sprawling and was considered the Versailles of America. It was nicknamed. It was filled with priceless artwork, Raphael's, Vermeer's. He had the largest Rembrandt collection in North America. All that artwork now is at the National Museum in National Gallery in DC. But to be able to walk through the spaces and to see where Harry lived and where he ate and, where his mother would have received guests and all those scenes that take place in the book, I wanted to make sure were also historically accurate.
Good. That's always good when an author actually takes the next step and actually goes to these places and visits these places, just so to make sure even small details really make a difference in storytelling.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember with the historian who was walking me through Linwood Hall, Harry's house, and it's not yet open to the public. It's undergoing an extensive renovation now, that he mentioned that in the reception room, there was a Pekingese silk yellow sofa with purple pillows. And I remember just being like, oh my God, the color combination of that is so unusual and vibrant. And I have to put that in the book. So, you can't get that information from history books. You really have to go, do your due diligence and find people who have that, source material.
Right.
For sure. I thought that was one of the things that really made your book stand out for me. So I'm a historian and I deal in the facts, but I do read a fair amount of historical fiction. And the thing that made your book stand out above many of the others that I've read was that attention to detail. And just the idea that you really do bring us into that space very, very well. When you're in the spaces that Harry would have lived in and existed in, you actually feel like you're there in a very authentic way. Whereas I find many other authors who I've read sort of play fast and loose, and it ends up more fantasy than fact. Yours was just the perfect melding of the two. And it made it an absolute joy to read from that perspective.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad we have a historian here because, it's wonderful to be appreciated for all that hard work.
Yeah, it is. Believe me, I know it's a lot of work. Even when I do shows for the Halloween podcast, it's a lot of work to try to get down all of the details of certain happenings, of certain things that actually did take place. But you have to look at it through the lens of this actually happened. I was not there. I need to rely on all of these other sources to come up with my own conclusion, and that is, how we come up with if it's true or not. But yeah, I mean, going there and actually looking at these places, that definitely helps.
Absolutely.
But we kind of a fun question, Alyson, since the book centers around a ghost. Do you personally believe in ghosts?
So I have kind of a funny story to tell, because you can hear me and how enthusiastic I am about learning and doing my research and making sure my books are as historically accurate and emotionally authentic as possible, knowing that I needed to write in the perspective of a ghost, wanted to go straight to the source of someone who communicates with ghosts, because I wanted to learn from them, how do they hear spirits from the other side. To answer your question, I do believe that there's certain people who are very sensitive to this thin veil that I think connects us to the other side. I do believe that. And I do feel in my own background as a novelist that there's certain things that have happened in my life where they do feel like someone has gifted me this story on purpose because they do want something to be told. And so I do feel that there's something at play that I don't quite understand fully, but I feel that there is another energy out there. So in order to make sure in the scenes where Violet begins to suspect that Harry's voice might be communicating to her, I didn't feel confident using my own imagination. I wanted to find an expert. So I was recommended to go to a medium. And I said, and I purely just wanted to interview him and, tell him a very brief idea what this book was about, but then to ask him how a ghost might communicate different things. And so I went there, and I remember I said, for example, there's going to be a scene in the library, and I don't know, could Harry's ghost write a message in, the condensation of a window? And he was like, no, oh my God, no, never. A ghost would never do something like that. And he said, for him, when he feels a spirit come into the room or is trying to send a message, something, for example, there could be a change in the temperature in the room that she might notice. It might go from warm to very cold. There might be an unexpected fragrance that sort of arises. It could be the smell of someone's tobacco. It could be the smell of someone's perfume. There could be a strange knocking sound that keeps on happening in one particular place, beckoning someone in that direction. And then after I had interviewed him, and again, he did not know anything about the plot. I don't even know if I had mentioned at that point any details about Harry's family. I mean, he knew I was researching Harry, but he said Harry was in the room with him. And that, at first Harry he was feeling very defensive and concerned that I was going to be exploiting his family in some way and wanted to know what my intentions were. And I then explained more fully, what I was hoping to do. And he said Harry's entire spiritual energy started to soften, and he became tickled by this and was happy, especially when there's this also love story connected to the book, and communicated to this man that he in fact did have a love. It wasn't anyone like I'm writing, out of my imagination, but he was happy that I was sharing that. And he said, Harry wants to know if you have any questions. And I had a question because I had a plot issue with this. I needed something to be discovered, but I didn't know how Violet was going to make the big reveal. And the ghost gave me the solution, which is incredible because the medium could not have known there were certain details in the memorial room, that there were certain artifacts. And Harry's ghost told me where something should be placed. And I thought that was really incredible. So I used it. So whether it was truly his ghost or it was just something else, I was so delighted to have another help from the other side.
Is there any credits to him in the book?
I do definitely credit the medium for meeting with me. And I just sent him a book, just thanking him. Because, one of those things where, will I ever 100% believe Harry was in the room with me? I don't know. But it certainly is possible. And as a novelist, I will never rule anything out. I recognize there are some things that I just don't know completely.
Whether it was Harry or the medium who suggested that big reveal, that's just so fabulous. That really just adds an extra layer of wow, because it is a very good reveal. I won't give it away, I promise, because that will spoil things. But absolutely, that my mind's just a little bit blown there.
It's good for your Halloween podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love to know more about the character of Violet and how you came to invent her as and she really is the perfect complement to this story. And I know you already talked about her personal tragedy. Again, I won't ruin it for anyone. But was it just that you felt married her up so well to this? sort of the person who communicates with Harry, or were there other things that helped you craft the character of Violet?
Hmm. So, with the character of Violet, I definitely knew, as I mentioned before, that I wanted her to have suffered her own personal loss and that she was grieving when she enters the Widener Library to seek employment. That was definitely always part of going to be her backstory. There was also this idea of water in her backstory and what happens with her boyfriend, Hugo. I wanted to work with this parallel of drowning and water that I thought not only is interesting because both tragedies are, come about because of the danger of water, but also how water as an element mimics grief, how it pulls us and ebbs and flows, and that it's sometimes the tide of it is unexpected, and it swells, and there can be, gasps of air where you're feeling better, but then you can plummet deeper into water. And so that element of water in her backstory was important. The funny thing is I've been on tour for the book just came out on the 14th. And so I've just been doing a lot of interviews, and someone said, did you pick her name Violet because of the flowers in the memorial room? And I didn't. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I even know there's a scene when the florist says, oh, it's a great name. And, Violet means strength and endurance. But I picked the name because it was the name that had I had a third child, I would have named her Violet. And that was really the reason. But it's funny because so many people think it's, the flower and the flowers in the memorial room. So, Violet, she has a really big arc in the book because she starts out, she's really depressed. And I think as readers were like, oh, she's really in the, dumped. And it's sometimes hard to witness read about someone who is so depressed. But then you see how this, job at the Widener and this feeling of connection with Harry's spirit starts to invigorate her, and her curiosity is piqued, and you start to see how important books have always been to her, and what is her relationship with her grandmother, and and how do books heal her, and what was the relationship with Hugo, and how that relationship bonded them, and why they fell in love. And then you see in parallel Harry's story with Ada, who is the female bookseller at Quaritch. She's inspired by the fact that Quaritch had a sister, Charlotte, who worked there. And I was really intrigued that in the Gilded Age there could be a female antiquarian bookseller. And I started to think, well, how could Ada be educated? How could she have come into the book trade? Who is she? And make her into a early 20th century female book heroine. I mean, I love Ada as well. She's very sassy and spunky, holds her own, is a budding collector herself, doesn't want Harry to just, gift her books. She wants to, she loves the thrill of getting one at a deal. So, both Violet and Ada were really fun female book heroines to put into the book as foils to Harry.
I think we all sort of wonder, how would we respond if we encountered a ghost? And I think Violet is just the perfect representation of how somebody might actually respond to something like that and open themselves up to the idea of that. And I also I felt like there were parallels too between Violet, Harry's mother, and sort of how the library was healing for both of them. Like his mother set it out to be something that would preserve his memory, and that gave her purpose. And in the end, it sort of gives Violet her purpose as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it helped them get their lives back on track after this horrible tragedy. And I just think setting a ghost story in a library is a very sort of classic Gothic thing, but you've reinvented it in such a wonderful way where it's very relatable. So I remember, sort of as you were saying with the pages in the library, I remember researching at the British Library in London, where there's a similar process for rare books, and just finally having a volume put in front of me. So my area of history is early modern history, which incorporates Tudor history. And I remember having a volume placed in front of me that belonged to Henry VIII, and seeing his actual handwritten notes in the margin and thinking to myself, this is as close to a ghostly encounter as I'm ever going to get, because this person who I've read about, studied, touched these pages and actually made these notes and these markers so that anybody reading it after him would understand that these were important to him and to sort of his thought process. And it was just such a eerie, heavy but wonderful feeling. And to me, that's libraries. And you just brought that so much to life in your book. I really can't say enough good things about how you evoke that sense of sort of the otherworldly within the pages of physical books.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Meghan, because, there are these passages in the book where Harry comments about, seeing the fingerprint of those people who have touched these pages before, and your description of seeing the handwritten notes. I mean, again, that's what makes a book so incredibly special, that you can get almost like a roadmap of the internal thoughts of people who might have read it before, and you're touching that, and there's this immediate bridging into the past. And that is just, so special. My daughter and I do this thing between books when we share them. I underline, if I read it first, there are certain passages that I underline, or I have like a little code where, I put an exclamation next to a sentence that I think is really beautiful, or a heart next to something that I love. And then when she reads it, she does the same. If I get a book from her first, I can get like an inner reading of her mind of what passages she loves the most. And it's like a quiet dance between us. And so that's mother and child, but it's the same when you're reading a book that's marked from someone from, hundreds of years ago. You get, insight into them and what's important to them. And that's priceless.
It's almost like time travel.
It is
the time travel as I'll ever get.
Yeah, and it's like you're sitting with their spirit for a moment in time.
Yeah, I kind of handle the same thing on a daily basis. I deal in a lot of coins, so I get coins that are hundreds of years old. I've had coins in here that are back in BC. So, like, imagine where that coin has been for the past 2,500 years of its life. Who's held it? Like, what was this used for? Was it used to buy a piece of bread? Like, you just don't know. And holding those things in my hands all the time is a very surreal feeling.
Oh, now I want to write a book about a coin collector. I might have to contact you, Lyle. That's like so fascinating. Immediately you think of how many hands have clasped those coins, the oils of their fingers on it, and what exchanges took place. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I had a story idea about a coin that was cursed, and it has like a long lineage of people that have handled it, that have paid. They've paid for murders with it. They've paid for like a bunch of bad stuff, and this coin is like notorious, and it's said to be at like the Louvre or something like that. And what really got me thinking about it was in the last couple of days that we had that robbery or whatever it was. I think it was I'm not sure which museum it was.
The Louvre.
Yeah, the Louvre.
Yeah.
And like they I think they estimated they stole $100 million worth of stuff. Like, that is outrageous. But that's what kind of got me thinking of, what if I take that story and then make it to where a couple of thieves go in there and they unwittingly take it, and it just spills out a lot of craziness for them, but they don't want to admit that they took it, because if they admit anything, then they'll be caught. And yeah, so that's just the things that float in my head late at night when I can't sleep.
Join the creative club.
I want to read both these books.
I'll get on it for the Halloween podcast.
Right? Chop chop.
Yeah, I know. So, I had a nice question right here for you, but I lost it in my mix of stuff. But we talk about there's a lot of things like of legacy. How did you want to explore the idea of legacy in your final chapters of the story?
Yeah, so legacy is sort of this umbrella which this story is told. I mean, you have the legacy, obviously, that this mother wants to create for Harry, making sure that not only his book collection that she became in charge of after he died, in his will, she was the one who was supposed to make sure that it was taken care of. But this sense of making sure a name is never forgotten. And as I touched upon earlier, that every single day, dozens of tour guides mention the legend behind Harry Elkins Widener. So they don't just say his name; they tell this story about whether he did go back for this rare and precious book. But on a more spiritual level, it makes you contemplate your own legacy. The sense of how do you want to be remembered. I was just doing a podcast before I got on with you where someone said to me, well, what about the mother who has lost a child who doesn't have the finances to create a monument? Like, what happens to her? And I said, well, I think this book is about repurposing energy in itself in order to channel grief after great tragedy. There are so many ways, I think, to make sure a name is not forgotten. I mean, obviously, there's charitable organizations and scholarships and things like that. I personally remember when I published my first novel 25 years ago, and I had this almost sense of relief, like, well, now if I die, I'm leaving something behind, which, I was 25 years old. So it was, very grand of me to think that anyone would care about the fact that I've left behind my debut book. But I do, as a mother, constantly tell my children to contemplate that life is about leaving beautiful glimmers of yourself behind and contributing to society and trying to make the world a better place. To repair the world in some way, whether it's contributing something creative or helping people. And I hope that The Missing Pages enforces this sense that, yes, Harry Elkins Widener was 27 years old when he died. He was way too young. But even, when you meet people who are in their 90s, they always say how quick it went, that life is still short, even when you do make it to being as old as that. So I hope that this book makes people contemplate about what they want to leave behind when they're no longer here, and to channel our creativity and our intelligence and our compassion into something that's lasting. I think this book is a really good example of why that's important.
Yeah, legacy is one of those things that is very important to me personally. Like, there's a lot of things that I always tell my wife, like, you can remarry. If anything happens to me, I just don't forget me. Like, that's just what I don't want to be forgotten. And I don't think doing a Halloween podcast for as long as I have, and Halloween being the biggest thing, and now hosting is free. So the Halloween podcast is going to be out there for years and years and years to come, way after I'm gone. So unless Halloween becomes outlawed or something like that in future years, my name, my voice will still be floating out there. And that's same with books. We have books that are hundreds of years old and thousands of years old, and those authors are not forgotten because they are always there.
Yes, it's wonderful. It'll always be here.
On the plus side, if it's outlawed, then you get to be infamous.
And then there's going to be like a clandestine channel where people are going to share it, a resistance.
Yes. And then people try to bring me back from from the past.
No, like I said, I was just so impressed with this novel, and I'm actually going to go back and reread it when I can do so without my 2-year-old running circles around me, because it deserves more attention than I was able to give it as I was reading it. But I just am absolutely in love with it. So absolutely brilliant. Can't recommend it enough. If you've never read it, I highly recommend that you go out, buy it, and give it a chance, especially during spooky season.
Yes. Well, to kind of close things out, I have a couple more questions for you, Alyson. What do you hope readers carry with them after they've finished the last page of your book?
That's a good question. So I hope that when you get to the last page of this novel, you probably, when you picked it up, were drawn to the story of a unknown passenger that you didn't know about before who boarded the Titanic. And that was probably the initial draw to learn more about him and his story. But I guess when you get to the last page, I'd want you to have a more contemplative, spiritual reaction to the novel about what it means to have a life well lived. And as I mentioned before, about leaving something behind and bridging a connection to our ancestors in the past. Storytelling is a wonderful way to keep people alive. And this book is like meant for book lovers because it does take place in a library. Harry, Ada, Violet, they all love books so much. And it's about bridging connection. So next time you're on a train, or you're, on a plane and someone's reading a book, ask them what they're reading, share your story with them. Because I do believe that, in a time when the world feels more divisive than ever, making connections and bridging with other people and looking back into the past, Meghan's a historian, recognizing, the lessons we can learn from history. It's all just so important. So when you get to the last page, I hope that you think about that.
Yeah, that is that's actually very nice and heartfelt.
I mean it.
So for my final question, and this kind of leads into the previous one. If Harry could have read the missing pages himself, what do you imagine he'd say to you? What would be the thing that you would have liked him to say to you? Either like a good job or thank you, or what would make you feel like you did him justice?
I think if he said, I'm going to get like teary, thank you for putting so much love into the missing pages.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, when you read the book, you'll know there is so many different versions of love. I mean, there's the, obviously the maternal love, there's romantic love, and there's the love of those people who pull us out of the depths of grief, and who that inner circle is. And so I think when I wrote from the perspective of Harry's ghost, one of the most poignant scenes for me is when he writes about seeing his mother grieve from above and wanting to give her signs that she's okay, that he's okay. And so, for me, I would hope that those scenes where I write about him acknowledging his mother's despair and her sorrow was deeply moving and authentic for him to read.
Good. Well, Alyson, thank you so much for coming on the show with us. Your book is truly something that I really want to dive into it. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, that's the thing about a good book. It's waiting whenever you're ready.
Yes.
There's no rush.
Yes. So Alyson, tell us a little bit about where we can get the book, anything else that you might want to hit on. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So The Missing Pages, it was just published on October 14th. It should be at all the major booksellers. Also, your independent booksellers. I'm always, encouraging people to go into their independent community bookstores. And if they don't see The Missing Pages, they will surely be able to order it for you. And then on all the online sites. So it should be available at any place that books are sold. You can connect with me at Instagram at my name. It's just Alyson Richman. I have an unusual spelling, ALYSON RICHMAN. And then I'm also on Facebook under my author's name, Alyson Richman. I'm not on any other social media platforms, but if you go on my website, AlysonRichman.com, I do have an events page which says where I'm on tour, so you might be able to see me in person. And then there's also some downloadable book club questions. If there are any book clubs that are listening to you, there's a sheet that you can download, a PDF, to sort of facilitate your book club questions.
Fabulous.
Perfect. Well, before we go, I got one more quick little question for you, Alyson. A very kind of fun one, but do you think that if Harry's ghost was really out there, do you think he would be haunting the library or the crash site or the wreck site of the Titanic? Where do you think he would actually be?
What a creative question. No doubt he would be in his library, his beloved books. Harry always wanted to be an arm's length of a book. So there's no question he's inhabiting the library, Widener Library. He is definitely not underwater, because think about the damage of the Titanic library. They actually had a library board. It'll be devastating to him to spend eternity seeing the destruction of beloved books. He wants to be in a place where books are preserved.
Yeah, he's probably floating on water to begin with. But yeah, I mean, and then that kind of ties into he is haunting an actual item, not necessarily where his death took place. So that's just a nice, interesting angle. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on the show, and it was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Alyson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you guys, thank you so much for listening. And make sure you check out her book, The Missing Pages. I will put a bunch of links in the show notes. So please make sure you guys support all of the guests that we have here on the Halloween podcast. Make sure they feel loved, and make sure they feel supported, because that's also another big thing with artists and authors and things like that. They crave, well, I don't know about crave, but we love the support from listeners and viewers and readers and stuff. So make sure you check out her book, The Missing Pages. Like I said, links will be in the show notes. And that's going to do it for us for today, guys. I will see you later for another episode. Not sure when, but yeah, it will show up. You guys have a good night.